Welcome to Blessings and Curses, a journey through Deuteronomy 28. The Assyrian Manifestation in 722 BCE, the Babylonian rule under Nebuchadnezzar in 586 BCE, and the Roman Captivity in 70 AD, bringing to light the connections in Yah's word to these momentous events. A central focus will be the transatlantic slave trade, a subject we will dissect in great detail through the lens of Deuteronomy 28. But we won't stop at history. We probe into the present. Who inhabits modern Israel? Who are today's Jews, Israelites, or Hebrews? This enlightening journey is our effort to present ourselves approved to Yah, rightfully dividing the word of truth, 2 Timothy 2:15. Let's begin today's episode.
All right, praise Yah, and Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Welcome to our afternoon study where we are dissecting Deuteronomy chapter 28 in an effort to make sure that we understand the prophecy that Yahuwah gave through Moses, and important because it does several things. One, we see how there is a pattern to the way Yahuwah moves and the way that he gave grace to and had compassion for Israel. We saw how he stretched out the timeline, constantly, pleaded with them to turn back to him and not to follow in the ways of the other nations as they did, taking on idols as theirs, worshiping them, going to the other nations for counsel. So what did Yahuwah do? He turned and let them seek after and pursue what they wanted. We saw the different captivities, and that's emulated in the reading of the passage, our foundational passage, which we're about to read. And we'll continue to talk about some of those things. But we see history laid out before us, and not just with Israel, because we saw last week how this prophecy goes into now, all the way to the end. So let's do that. Let's read our foundational passage so that we're clear on what we're studying and why we're studying it, and then talk about how those manifestations came about, and then we'll kind of do a review of what we covered last week. And the reason for the review is there are two parts to that prophecy last week, and we went into some of them. We started looking at the different kingdoms that took over. And we ended with Rome, but we only looked at the first part of Rome. So we're going to continue to look at those things, and we're going to see this push for this world conglomeration, and we'll talk about that in more detail today. So let's get rolling. If I can get a reader, we'll pull up our foundational verse and read it, and start talking through some of these. Who's my first reader today? All right, Brother Al, if you would turn to Deuteronomy chapter 28, you'll be reading verses 36 through 48. Deuteronomy 28, verses 36 through 48.
Praise Yah. Deuteronomy 28, 36 to 48. Yahuwah shall bring you and your king, which you shall set over you, unto a nation which neither you nor your fathers have known. And there shall you serve other Elohim, wood and stone. and you shall become an astonishment, a proverb, and a byword among all nations whither Yahuwah shall lead you. You shall carry much seed out into the field, and shall gather but in little in, for the locust shall consume it. You shall plant vineyards and dress them, but shall neither drink of the wine nor gather grapes, for the worms shall eat them. You shall have olive trees throughout all your coasts, but you shall not anoint yourself with the oil, for your olive shall cast his fruit. You shall beget sons and daughters, but you shall not enjoy them, for they shall go into captivity. All your trees and fruit of your land shall the locust consume. The stranger that is within you shall get up above you very high, and you shall come down very low. He shall lend to you, and you shall not lend to him. He shall be the head, and you shall be the tail. Moreover, all these curses shall come upon you and shall pursue you and overtake you till you be destroyed, because you hearken not unto the voice of Yahuwah Eloheka, to guard his commandments and his statutes, which he commanded you. And they shall be upon you for a sign and for a wonder upon your seed forever, because you served not Yahuwah Eloheka with joyfulness and with gladness of heart for the abundance of all things. Therefore shall you serve your enemies, which Yahuwah shall send against you in hunger and in thirst and in nakedness and in want of all things. He shall put a yoke of iron upon your neck until he have destroyed you. Praise Yah.
Man, and that's always difficult to hear, and then knowing how the picture unfolded for us, because we watched Assyria come in and take the northern kingdom. We saw Nebuchadnezzar and Babylon come in and take away the southern kingdom, Judah. And we're currently in Babylon now, but we watched, the details of that prophecy that Brother Al just read, and we saw them happen verbatim. We saw those things. We saw the stubbornness of Israel, the stubbornness of their king, and their unwillingness to bend back to Yah, to heed to his prophets. So we picked up where the first captivity of Judah, the southern kingdom, into Babylon, we saw how they went after the royal children. Daniel, Shadrach, or I like to use the names that they were given as Hebrews: Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, Azariah, were taken in this first deportation. And we discussed fully that there's a reason that we're looking at this first deportation now, because this ushers us into the world that becomes, even up to the world we're in right now. But it sets the course of history so that we can follow what happened to Judah, into captivity, being, taken then into the Medo-Persian Empire, and then released. And then we looked at Rome. We were looking at Rome, and we looked at some of the other kingdoms. But we see how this sets the course forward to 70 AD and the dispersion and on and up until now. So very important that we follow this course in Daniel, because we can clearly see the motion. We can clearly see what happens. But right now we looked at this dream, right? We looked at this dream that Nebuchadnezzar had, and it was so vivid in detail, and as Daniel, was able to come and understand it through Yah, he was able to give vivid details, and we were able to line those up with actual facts in history last week that we looked at a couple of things. But there's another part of that that we didn't cover, and I told you guys that we may get into some economics, world economics, because they clarify what the dream is about. They clarify the course of the world. And it's amazing, you know, as I was looking at these different things, different documents, some of which I'm going to share with you today. World leaders, secret meetings, all of these things building up to toe time, you know, because we looked at the prophecy and we got down, we got the legs, you know, we saw Rome being that iron, and then we went down to the feet, and we're now in the toe time. So we're going to talk about that a little bit and how that comes to be. So just by way of review, I'll go over a few things and then we'll start moving through. But last week we looked at Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, Azariah being told about this dream that the king had, and then and not only the dream, but then his harsh and rash response and decision to kill all those who could not tell him what this dream was. So all the wise men, remember, came before him, and he wanted them not just to tell him what the dream meant, he wanted them to tell him what the dream was. And they concluded that they couldn't figure that out. No man could figure that out. Daniel and his friends taking the matter first to prayer to Yah, Yah then revealing it to them. Daniel takes this revelation. You got someone unmuted themselves? Please mute yourself. I don't want to have to put the solid mute over everything. But Daniel looks, sees through the vision of Yah what this means. So as he saw what was happening, Daniel unfolds this dream, and we connected it to actual history, right? We connected it to the Gentile empires, you know, and we saw how most of that that we talked about has already been fulfilled, because those empires are now gone. And we looked at, you know, Babylon. We looked at, we'll talk about that in a minute. But the point that I want to make here in today's study is that there's a broader picture, a broader perspective of Gentile world powers, right? Because remember, when we started reading, we saw it switch from Greek. I'm sorry, we saw it switch from Hebrew to Aramaic, which was the Gentile language, right? And we know that all the way up until chapter 7, right before chapter 8, it stays Aramaic and then switches back to Hebrew. This is the time of the Gentile world powers, including the times that we're living in now. So we must definitely need to pay attention to what's going on around us, right? But let's look at this again. Let's look at and read through some of the passage last week, because I want to make sure we see these things clearly. And I'll read just to start off. It says, starting in verse 28 of chapter 2, it says, "But there is an Elohim in heaven who reveals secrets," Daniel speaking to Nebuchadnezzar, "and he made known to King Nebuchadnezzar what will be in the latter days. Your dream and the visions of your head upon your bed were these. So Daniel's doing so much more, as we talked about, than just giving him the dream. He tells him his thoughts, what he was thinking about before he even went to sleep, which caused him to have this dream. He says, as for you, O king, your thoughts came into your mind while on your bed about what would come to pass after this. And he who reveals secrets has made known to you what will be. So he had these thoughts before he falls asleep. The dream comes in about the questions that he has, about the uncertainty that he has, about the anxiety of being this world leader and what will come of him. Daniel tells him what he was thinking about before he even fell asleep. So imagine Nebuchadnezzar at this point, going from not knowing what it meant to going to all of his wise men and chief, magi and the, astrologers, astronomers, all of these learned people, mathematicians, engineers. They don't know. They can't tell him what his dream was. They can't tell him what it means. To Daniel telling him his thoughts before he even fell asleep, now on his way to revealing his dream. And he says about what would come to pass after this. And he who reveals secrets has made known to you what will be. But as for me, this secret has not been revealed to me because I have more wisdom than anyone living, but for our sakes, who make known the interpretation to the king, and that you may know the thoughts of your heart. Verse 31, you, O king, were watching, and behold, a great image. This great image, whose splendor was excellent, stood before you, and its form was awesome. This image head was of gold, its chest and arms of silver, its belly and thighs of bronze, its legs of iron, its feet partly of iron, partly of clay. You watched while a stone was cut out without hands, which struck the image on its feet and iron clay and broke them into pieces. Then the iron, the clay, the bronze, the silver, the gold were crushed together and became like chaff from the summer threshing floors. The wind carried them away so that no trace of them was found, and the stone that struck the image became a great mountain and filled the earth. Verse 36. This is a dream. Now we will tell you the interpretations of it before the king. So he tells him what the dream was. Obviously, now he tells him what the dream means, the interpretation of the dream. And we looked at those things. We looked at the different elements. We talked about their strength. We talked about how each empire swallowed up the other. We talked about their worth from top to bottom and their weight. But we saw how all of these things happen. So let's look at it. It says, this is a dream. Now we will tell the interpretation of it before the king. You, O king, are a king of kings. For Elohim of heaven has given you a kingdom. Right? Many times we went back to, how Yah is orchestrating all of this. We saw Jeremiah call him Yah's servant. Why? Because Yah was putting these things in place. Right? And he says, he has given you the kingdom, power, strength, and glory. And wherever the children of men dwell, or the beasts of the field and the birds of the heaven, he has shown them he has given them into your hand and has made you ruler over all. You are this head of gold, he tells them. right? That's you. And we looked at Babylon being that gold. And he says, but after you shall rise another kingdom, inferior in your thoughts, then another, a third kingdom of bronze, which shall rule over all of the earth. And the fourth kingdom shall be as strong as iron, inasmuch as iron breaks in pieces and shatters everything. And like iron that crushes, that kingdom will break in pieces and crush all others. Whereas you saw the feet and the toes, which we're going to cover today, the feet and the toes, partly of potter's clay and partly of iron, the kingdom shall be divided, yet the strength of the iron shall be in it, just as you saw the iron mixed with ceramic clay. And as the toes of the feet were partly of iron and partly of clay, so the kingdom shall be partly strong and partly fragile. Remember those things. As you saw the iron mixed with ceramic clay, they will mingle with the seed of men, but they will not adhere to one another. Just as iron does not mix with clay. Here's the verse. And in the days of these kings, the Elohim of heaven will set up a kingdom which shall never be destroyed, and the kingdom shall not be left to other people. It shall break in pieces and consume all the kingdoms, and it shall stand forever. Inasmuch as you saw that stone was cut out of the mountain without hands, and that it broke in pieces the iron, the bronze, the clay, the silver, and the gold, the great Elohim has made known to the king what will come to pass after this. This dream is certain, and its interpretation is sure. So that's where we left off last week, and we'll read the final verses of the chapter in a few. But I wanted to make sure that we got into truly understanding what this all means, because we looked at the gold and we talked about how the gold was Babylon, just as Daniel said. And we saw how the silver, and we talked about last week, went into the Medes and the Persians because they were the ones that defeated Babylon, right? And then we saw the brass and the bronze, and we talked about Alexander the Great, who was in charge of Greece, how he defeated the Medes and the Persians. And we saw how the emblems on their shields and their helmets were all brass and bronze. And then we saw the iron and the strength of Rome. But we talked about how Rome wasn't defeated like the other empires. And we even talked about other empires around the other parts of the world. But we saw how Rome was not defeated. They weren't beat in battle. They weren't taken over. They kind of just dissipated and imploded from within because of immorality. And we talked about some of those pillars of immorality because we looked at Ed Gibbons' book, The Decline and the Fall of the Roman Empire. And just by review, we saw how Rome records the decline and ascribed it to 5 things: to rapid increase of divorce within the undermining of sanctity of the home, right? Which is the basis of society, the sanctity of the home. That was undermined. And I said then, does that sound familiar? There's a reason that correlates with what we're talking about today. The second thing he says, higher and higher taxes and the spending of money for bread and celebrations. The third thing, a mad craze for pleasure in the arena, the Colosseum, the gladiators, becoming more excited and more brutal, more exciting and more brutal, right? That's what they focused on, and they lost interest in everything else. Number 4 was military spending while the enemy was within inside the walls. And we talked about how Rome's governors and their Senate went against the Caesars, and they were battling back and forth. They all wanted to lead, and then they all started killing each other and setting up the families and murdering the families. And then other countries started beating them in small battles, and then eventually imploded. And the fifth thing was faith faded into a mere form, losing touch with life and becoming impotent. It just became a thing. So these were the things that imploded Rome. And the reason that correlates to today, because if you look around, those same things are happening. The taxes, the divorce rate, money for pleasure, military spending, faith becoming mundane and impotent. And this is what it says about the kingdoms. Verse 42 says, and the toes of the, no, it said, oh, I'm sorry, verse 44, and in the days of these kings, the Elohim of heaven will set up a kingdom. So in the day of these kings, so this is after the Roman Empire, more about Rome idealism, Rome's way of life, Rome's thinking really never dying, right? Really never dissipating. So much as a kingdom and an empire, yes, but the thought process, the things of importance, the educational system, all of these things, originally starting in Babylon, adapted by all these other empires and put into Rome, Rome's ideology still existing and being rebuilt. But I don't want to just say that. I want to show you and read you some facts, because when we look at these 10 toes and we see how it's related to 10 kings, as we read on and we get into the latter chapters of Daniel 8, it calls them the 10 horns. So we'll talk about that more later too. But what I want to focus on now is there's this great push, right? And when we get into the next couple chapters of Daniel, we'll see that same push. But this push right now, and I'm not jumping ahead of anything, I'm just further explaining the prophecy so that we can see that it's clear happening today, right before our eyes. Some not so before our eyes, in ways that have to be uncovered, and we'll talk about those. But there's this globalist movement right now. There's this economic power movement that is persisting and has started and is unraveling. So I want to look at some things, and then we're going to get back to and finish the chapter. But just some facts. In 1913, the Federal Reserve Board was established publicly. But 3 years prior to that, in 1910, November 1910 to be exact, there was a secret meeting, and you can look all this stuff up. This isn't, privy just to me. You can find all of this stuff online and the accuracy of it. But there was a private meeting on Jekyll Island in Georgia. Jekyll Island was a private hunting club of J.P. Morgan. So there's speculation there's speculation of who was in this private meeting. And I've heard different things, but I wasn't able to solidify international involvement. But as we continue to talk about these facts, we'll see how international involvement was involved. Now, remember, this whole idea is the same thing Nimrod had in mind when he talked about one world, one leader, one voice, Tower of Babel. Nebuchadnezzar, hearing the dream. Next week we're going to go into him building this statue that the four Yahudim said, "Nah, we're not bound down to that." Right? We're going to talk about that. But one of the things that is clear and evident throughout is this unification, this solidification, this one world order that we see happening. So this private meeting, while I wasn't able to solidify the international part in the actual meeting, I was able to come up with some facts from it. So in this private meeting, all the wealthy bankers from around the country were there. So you had J.P. Morgan, you had Kuhn, Leib and Company, you had the National Bank of New York, and you had the Bankers Trust Company. And the purpose was to establish financial stability under a unified front. What was that unified front? The central banking system. All right. Everything is about economics. Everything is about control. Everything is about one ruler, one world order. So we see this happening in 1913. So this was being established more than 100 years ago, right? So, Aaron, you got a question? Where do you go? Go ahead.
I want to say that many people tried to stop this central banking system, like Abraham Lincoln. He was assassinated because he was trying to put in the greenbacks,
Yeah.
which were backed by gold.
Right.
They don't want that, so they killed him. And also JFK put in U.S. notes, which were also backed by gold. They killed him.
Yeah. So,
And also Andrew Jackson. Andrew Jackson also tried to put I forgot what he tried to establish, but he tried to get rid of the central banking system. He
right.
was almost killed, but thanks to Yah's favor, the pistols missed.
Yeah. So they saw, and even in 1913, there was also an attempt to stop it by Congress. From what I was able to read, when everybody went home for the Christmas holiday, they had a meeting on the 23rd and got it passed in Congress and the Senate for the central banking system. Sister Dolores.
Just like we have the different books of the gospel, the Torah, that one supports the other. And you did your research and you were, finding out about all this 1913 and J.P. Morgan. There's a book called The Librarian. I'm not sure you're familiar with it, but it was about a woman named Bella DaCosta Green, and she was like, so the J.P. Morgan library they have now, she was, they found out, well, years later it came out that she was Black, and no one knew it. You know the story behind that, but the whole thing inside the book, they talked about his power. He was the one that basically set everything for Wall Street, and the collapse, that reached overseas. So, you haven't been able, he said, to find that. And I'm sure it's in all different types of things, but that book even helps your point, is that man had power beyond power, beyond power. And still to this day, that family holds power.
Yeah, Rockefeller, Carnegie Mellon, and some others were also heavily involved. But yeah, absolutely. What I meant when I said I couldn't find it, I meant supposedly in this meeting there were international banks in the meeting, but I could only find the books or the literature that I found that talked about those other banks. There was no proof in the actual document, so I'm sure I can find some of that stuff. But they created the central banking system. Very, very good, Aaron. Very, very good content. Also, Sister Dolores, you added, because I'm going somewhere with this, and I'm going to show you how these things put us in position to where we are now, to Yah stepping in, right? Just as he said, the toes are going to be crushed and crumbled. Sister Shimon.
It goes back even further because of when you said you couldn't find information about the international banks, and it goes back to the Medici, who were the original international bankers, starting way back. I think during the Dark Ages. So, and I mean, our enemy has always been there. So, yeah.
Right. So just to be clear, there's plenty of information about the international banks. What I couldn't confirm was the international banks being included in this secret meeting in 1910, when there's speculation that they were, which they probably were, because some of the information that I'm going to read going forward, we're going to see how international is really controlling everything and leading towards this conglomerate, this one world power, one world economic system. So bear with me, guys. Brother Aaron, go ahead.
I also want to say that banks do not loan money. They just give you the same money back. They don't loan anything.
Right. So let's continue. So so we got this formation of the central banking system, right? And there's some excuse me, there's some things in between. But in 1920, the League of Nations is formed. 63 countries. Stay with me. 1930, the Bank for International Settlements formed. And this was formed to facilitate cooperation with the central bank that was formed in 1913. So now we have, where they don't show, and this is what I was talking about, they don't show them being involved in this meeting. Now they have them coming back on the backside, 1930. Now they're incorporated. This Bank of International Settlements is now partnering with and cooperating with the central bank. All right. 1932, the RFC, which is the Reconstruction Fund Corporation, supports financials, banks, railroads, and businesses, backed by some of these international banks. All right. 1945, the United Nations Charter becomes effective. So you have these countries that form the United Nations. Here's the big one, because we talked about Rome's ideology persisting, even though they were no longer empire, their ideals and the structure and the system of Rome still exists. How do we know this? 1957, the Treaty of Rome is signed. This set the foundation for the development of the European Union, right? Economic integration and political cooperation among the European nations. So the European Union unification is really who controls the money right now. It's not the United States. The political cooperation brings in the power aspect of controlling and setting up this one. So you see everybody kind of joining in to create this one world order. 1959, the WCPA, which is the World Constitution and Parliament Association, was started to uplift world peace by a democratic federation of government. So we have all of these organizations starting to unify, to be one. And obviously there's some resistance. Obviously there's back and forth. Obviously you see wars, most of it being economical, most of it being about power and land and control, because there is this push to be one, and the countries that don't agree are usually the ones that get pushed to the side. Or if they're strong enough to resist, they make sure that their power persists, right? 1968, the Club of Rome is formed. And this is where intellectuals and business leaders are meeting to have critical discussions on pressing global issues. Remember, global unification is the push. This is what everyone is striving for. This is what, from the beginning, and someone brought up the enemy. Absolutely, the enemy is the orchestrator of these things. We saw it in Babylon, we saw it in Rome, we saw it in Persia. We see it now, and it's becoming clearer. 1973, the Trilateral Commission was formed. This is where Western Europe, Japan, and the United States made a treaty to solidify international trade. That's when you started seeing Toyotas and Datsuns. And, well, I think Datsun became Nissan. You started seeing them coming over to the country, and the European cars were going into Japan, right? So all of these things are starting to happen. And along with that, you see the commerce start to be unified. You see the networks coming under one roof, right? You got Fox and NBC and MSNBC, and they're all owned by the same conglomerate, right? Universities. We went through a litany of universities in their curriculum when we were going through what was being indoctrinated into Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego during their educational training in Babylon, and we likened it to what our kids are being fed, and we see the unification of these university heads, major companies. All of these things started happening. The beginning of them was in 1973. That's why you see all of these mergers happening continually, because the idea is to have one world order. 1992, the economic borders are removed in Europe, which allows common passports in the European countries. It allows continuity between the universities in Europe. And all these things were instituted in 1992. 2002, Europeans mint 80 billion coins to produce the euro in a common currency. So we see the euro going, above the dollar. I don't know if there's any financial experts out there, but you'll see the euro having more value. You also see Russia, Africa, and China talking about their own currency. Right? NATO starts building up its own strength around the same time as the US pulls some of their support. So NATO starts building up its alliances. So you have all of these countries economically, politically tied for the competition of power in having a one world order. All of this taking place predominantly in the European nations. Those European nations have banks that are tied to the banks that are in the United States, controlling things. Right? These things are happening, right? 10 toes. This is where power in economics is moving to the European nations. You'll hear me say it a lot. The European unification is not in America, it's in Europe. These things are happening around us to create this one world government, right? This happened in 1991. I gotta pull up this document. Give me a second. Okay, so we've been talking about this economic pool. We've been talking about being crushed. We've been talking about taking over. We've been talking about merging. We've been talking about power, right? So this document I'm about to read is a portion of a book called En Route to Global Occupation, written in 1991. This was 10 years before the World Trade Centers were collapsed, right? The book exposes the secret agenda of world unification, right? The secret agenda of world unification, stuff that was predicted or prophesied in Daniel chapter 2. All of those things are connected. Now watch this. This is on page 65 of this book. I'm just going to read a portion. It says, having gained some idea of America's role in building the New World Order, the only remaining question I have is what will happen to the US once it has fulfilled its mission? There is some disagreement among researchers on this question. Some believe that once we have entered the New World Order, Europe will be made the headquarters of the world government. Others believe that the seat of power of the world government will be in the United States, specifically in New York. So you have this one faction of researchers believe that Europe holds the unification. The others say that New York City, America, will be the world power. But there's something specific about those two ideas. They're actually one, because the banks that are backed by this are backed in New York, and they all reside in this building. Look what it says. As things currently stand, this is 1991, New York would be the logical choice to be the world's capital, given the fact that is the most powerful and influential city in the world, and that the United Nations, the Council of Foreign Relations, the Trilateral Commission, all of which we said started in those 1910, 20, 30, those years prior, we just read it. All of these are headquartered at the World Trade Center. However, the secret hierarchy of Europe, which is still ultimately in charge, what have we been saying, might have different plans. If they intend to locate the world capital in Europe, they will find a way to do so. Such a decision, however, will probably involve either the economic devastation or physical destruction of New York City. So we know that the World Trade Centers, where the economic power was collapsed, right? The actual city of New York wasn't destructed, but the economic devastation, the the collapse of the stock market, all of those things. Look, watch this. It says this could be accomplished in several ways. Economically, through a planned collapse of the stock market, or a severe depression resulting from our excessive national debt, or physically, as an act of terrorism, as a nuclear accident, or through a limited nuclear war. Whatever method would be selected, the European hierarchy, I believe, would be capable of carrying it out. What are you guys' thoughts on that? Raise your hands. Alexandria.
Shabbat Shalom, Elder
Shabbat shalom.
Rod. I find this discussion very interesting. Unfortunately, sometimes my thought thinking does go towards controversy, and the discussion of the Twin Towers has always been a part of my curiosity. And I just wanted to mention that you had noticed something that had happened in 1991, where someone was talking about the banks and how they were involved with being tenants at the Twin Towers. I wanted to remind you that there had actually been an attempt to bomb the Twin Towers. I believe it was 1991, where someone had drove a van into the parking area. So they were attempting to do something to that building, yes, way before 2001. And then also, and this is just something that I just happened to notice, and it had nothing to do with the Twin Towers at the time I was watching this movie, but when Harry Met Sally came out, there's a scene when Billy Crystal is dropping off the young lady's dropping him off in New York. That if I understand correctly, that the gate that you see like in Germany and in France, I think they call it the gate of BAAL.
Mm-hmm.
At that moment, when he's dropping her off, you can see the Twin Towers between that gate. Again, it's just a speculation. I believe that yes, the banks are a part of this thing that Hashatan has involved, but also the gate is indicator of a sacrifice, a sacrificial thing. But anyway, going back to your statement about the banks, yes, that building has a lot of tenants that had a lot of tenants that were owned by banks. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. There's plenty of TV shows that were birthed out of that idea. There's a show called Billions that was completely the man who became a billionaire because he didn't go to work that day when all of his colleagues were killed, and he had access to all of the money from that particular company. So the point and there's a lot of information out there. The point, though, was to connect what we see in Daniel to this prophecy and the 10 toes and the collapse and all of these things in this press to bring this world conglomeration to one, so that everything is controlled by one world power. And I'm gonna show you some other things. I'm gonna show you a short video. Brother Charles.
Hello, you can hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, man, this is what I'll be kind of talking about. I really, really like this. And it's a lot about history. And that's what I mean about, sometimes I understand we're into the word, but when you break down history, then you can bring it into the scripture and show what the scriptures are saying about it. And it can come into a full application in your head and you can understand. It's a lot of things I'm seeing, and I have to hold on till the Romans 70 AD study that you're going to bring out and the transatlantic slave trade. Because I can see something and I see the reasons why a lot of these things happening. But I do want to say this. It's funny how the very people who funded the what is it called? What happened in Germany? The Holocaust. The very people who funded the Holocaust are these same people, but the same people who funded the Holocaust are some of the people who was getting tortured. But people won't see that. It's their own people who funded for them to be tortured. And who put Hitler out there? And if you didn't think so, how is it that Jeff, the Ford company, this guy is from America and he funded Germany to make tanks for them? It's all inside out. Everything is inside out. It's constantly showing us, and y'all telling us this already. Inside out.
Yep,
and one last thing.
It's all in here. Mayan Comp. He says what his plan is going to be. He says how he took over. He talks about the banks. He talks about everything. Just from a historical perspective. I read a lot, so.
And last thing I want to say, the last thing I want to say is when it comes to like the sister said, how the banking system and who made Morgan P. Chase, it's the same thing you were speaking about when Babylon, they grabbed the greatest of Yasharal or whoever and they try to use them. It's the same thing going on, and I got some more later on. I gotta hold it. I can't put it in this study, but praise God, it's all coming together, brother. It's true. It's true.
Yeah, there's I appreciate you understanding the process and why we're taking so long purposefully so that we understand the movement here. It's not just a black and white. It's not just a, cut and dry answer. Like there's an unfolding of prophecy. That's why understanding history makes sense so that we understand the prophecy correctly. Otherwise, we'll get lost. But yeah, good stuff, brother. Brother Al, and then Brother Franz.
Praise Yah. You just, seeing the hidden hand, it's just like, where the devil took Yahusha to the mountain and said, look at all the kingdoms of the world, just bow down to me and I'll give it to you. And Yahusha didn't say, you liar, you don't have the capacity to do that, because he had been given that authority for that limited time, over the kingdoms of the world. And you see that, in secret, there's that control. So it's like organized chaos. You see everything like going on in the world at the moment. And it's like no direction, but there's like a plan, right? All towards that agenda, that world government or world power. Think of the World Economic Forum and the Great Resets and, things that they're kind of hammering into the mentality of people so that people are readily accepting of these things. And I think maybe that's why they've taken this time, because they have to tell a story that people just think, oh, it's just logical for things to happen this way. But there's that secret hand, there's that hand behind, there's the plan in politics, in education, in the military, in all of that, controlling and calling the shots. So it's not the people you necessarily see on your TV. Those are just more like puppets. There's a hidden hand that is controlling these things. Praise Yah.
Absolutely. We definitely see that. We see, you know, I like the way you said puppets. I would I know what a puppet is, but I would say a marionette, because a marionette has strings, you know what I mean, and it moves whichever way the orchestrator, the director moves it. This is what is happening, and it's planned. It's being pushed this way, orchestrated by the enemy. I want to read a couple more things. I want to show you guys a video after I explain this one fact that's happening. But let's go to Franz and then Carmen.
Shabbat Shalom. This is a fascinating conversation and something that I wanted to add to it relating to 9/11. I know it was a tough time back then, and ever since then that's been a I would say that was the first time in which I started to I guess sort of accept a bit of skepticism as to what was being portrayed and what was being presented as it relates to our government, and that led me down a path that even now I can see has kind of guided me to where we are. But something that may not be realized is that there were 2 buildings that were hit, but 3 buildings fell, including World Trade Center 7, which was not hit by a plane. And there was all sorts of records in there as well. And then on top of that, in the Pentagon, allegedly, and I don't know if this is true, there was a shortfall of $1 trillion that was going to be brought before Congress, the records of which were in the exact section where the Pentagon was hit by a plane. And then lastly, this entire war on terrorism was what brought America into Iraq, which is modern day Babylon. So there's a circle of that connects, I think, this vision of Daniel that brings this nation directly back into the land in which Daniel was prophesying to the king, right into Babylon, into Iraq, or modern day Iraq, which is ancient Babylon. Just wanted to add that.
Yeah, the region, but I think the mentality, the ideology of Babylon permeates through all nations. Like, the whole point is to understand the system is a Babylonian system that we live in. So it's all corrupt. But yeah, I definitely see those things. And it's unbelievable, what you're able to find, just by doing a little bit of research. I'm not talking about the conspiracy theory websites and videos. I'm just talking about actual facts that are documented, that can be proven. Because conspiracy theories are just going to take us down a rabbit hole. But the evidence is alarming. The evidence is scathing, that there's a plan for all of these things, and when I read Daniel and I see the formation of these 10 toes and the kings that are going to be overtaken by who? Yeah, he's going to crush them. But I want to talk about one other thing, and then we'll finish and close out. But Brother Dean, or Dean and Carmen.
Shabbat Shalom, Elder Rod. this, this Yahuwah, he does different things, He does different things, and he takes his children on different paths. And sometimes I feel like he takes us on these paths. He allows us insight to test our taste buds, And the reason why I say is so many of the things that are mentioned, I've been invited constantly to these things, whether it's the Economic Forum, whether it's, the Gates Foundation, like I've been to all of them, and I've sat in those little rooms where there are no windows, and the Macrons of the world, and they are there and they are discussing, and I literally sit there and I'm like, what are you doing here? You go from what are you doing here to realizing that you're not here to talk, you're here to gain an understanding. You're not here to build, even to network. You're here to gain an insight, so that bear witnesses, where two or more witnesses are gathered. So now you're speaking scripture, you're speaking history, past and present, and then I'm going to confirm to you that these are 100-year plans. When they're speaking, when they're inviting the Levites, they know what they're doing. They're inviting the Levites to their gatherings and saying, hey, we love what you're doing. Can we use you to spearhead? Yeah? Can we use you like the tip of an arrow for an initiative that's not being made clear? It's not being made clear. But that the two things are like iron and clay. They do not go together, but they will lead you to believe that anything that you're working on, and we're here to support you, and they will keep on calling you no matter how many times you reject them. They keep on calling you, because just like how Yahuwah has marked and sealed his people, they plan to seal and mark people too, and use them for their gain and for their agenda. So I just wanted to say that, and to say, Ephesians 6:12, because we do not wrestle. So when you said it about, it's not this thing, every race is there, every religion is there, and they don't advertise it as, oh, this is a Masonic lodge, or no, it's like we're having an event for world empowerment, social climate control, climate control. Sorry, what's the other one? Climate change. It's always a global initiative to improve humanity.
Yeah.
Yep. It's Ephesians 6:12, because we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against authorities, against the world rulers of the darkness of this age, against spiritual matters of wickedness in the heavenlies. It's very real.
It's interesting
Hallelujah.
that you went to one of the Paul's epistles, because I'm actually going to end, because the question is, okay, what does this mean? What does this mean for us in terms of making sure that we understand prophecy? Paul answers that for us, and I'm going to actually close with a passage from Paul, because he talks about this, right? But one of the things I wanted to share with you guys, and then I'm going to show you a video and we'll close. But specifically over the last 20 years, I think it's more than that. It's definitely more than that, because there's a movie from 1974 that discussed it. But out in the open over the last 20 years, the UN has been having conversations about exercising taxation on United States soil on certain things, and taking over land with water sources. Taking over land with water sources. But y'all don't believe me, so let's take a look at this video that was made last year. Give me a second. I'll pull it up. Man, did you guys catch that? They said they're disguising the names so that they don't show who owns them. The same thing that happened in the beginning when they started the central bank. They made a pact not to share the names of who was in charge. The UN trying to buy up land, now they can't directly do it, so they're going behind and using other names. If that happens, we're under global control. Do you understand that? Do you understand how this directly connects with prophecy and what we're reading, Sister Dolores?
Well, I think that it's already happening. I mean,
Oh
you
yeah,
set a precedent. I mean, in the sense of you asked the question, I guess it's somewhat rhetorical because it's really already happening.
yeah.
And another thing was going to, I know you were getting ready to depart,
No,
but
go ahead.
okay. Michael Burry, are you familiar with him? He was in the movie The Big Short. Did you ever
Oh
see
yeah,
that movie?
Mm-hmm.
About the guy who betted against everybody and he won, and they thought he was crazy because he paid all this money for this insurance that the market was going to go the opposite way. Long story short, after all that, one of the things that, it's like E.F. Hutton, people listen. And he said that the next oil was going to be water.
Mm.
He said that was going to be the next oil was water. And no one really understood. And I think you brought it home what you just said, that you pretty much showed that's why it's going to be the new oil, the new black oil.
That cool, refreshing drink that we now buy from the supermarket when it's supposed to be free. The contamination of the water storages, all of these things are all partied into making this a big business. And now you have foreign countries buying land to take over so that they're ready to seize at the time of opportunity. Brother Michael, Sister Deanna.
Shabbat shalom, y'all. I'm gonna try to keep it short and focused on this whole discussion today and that video and all that. I am very much into the history and revealing, reminding people that none of this stuff should be surprising us, and none of this. It's all in the Bible. It's all, it's been around forever, and it's our nation, as we're just being. As some of the stuff you're talking about is the fact that the powers that be are willing to give up our sovereignty over this nation, and they're starting from within, just like you're talking about with the Roman Empire.
Yeah.
But part of that is they're trying to diminish the sovereignty of our own homes, and it's it's just kind of craziness to me that people just don't see it and don't wake up. And I know that no politician, no political party, no nothing is going to save us from this crap. But one of the reasons why they went so hard, however you might feel about the last election, a lot of us, and I'm one of them, believe that it was stolen. Part of the reason they were so brazen about it was because Donald Trump had signed paperwork and was applying to get us out of the UN and get us as a nation out of the World Health Organization. It takes a year for the applications to go through. He signed them. He started the process too late. I think he had like 6 months left before the election. And he was trying to get us out of all this to make us a sovereign nation. And it's crazy, man. We could go down this. Maybe one day you and me can take a day off work and go down this rabbit hole. But it's just nuts.
The Donald Trump, Donald Trump was trying to make moves, with the UN. That's the statement I made earlier about the UN beefing up, their support. and was because the United States started to back off their support, and part of that was Donald Trump. So yeah, no, scripture tells us to pay attention to these things. Scripture shows us what these things are. These things are coming alive in Daniel chapter 2, right? You know, I'm gonna let Charles go, and then I want to jump back in because I want to finish the chapter, and then I want to read Paul's direction on what we need to do and what we need to be aware of. Go ahead, Charles.
Shalom. Yeah, my voice got a kickback out there. Is it okay?
Yeah, go ahead. You good?
Yeah. Um, yeah, that's again, I say, I heard the brother just say that, and it's not new. But when the world suppresses history and 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 does these things, this is why we can't understand some things. And then they attack the Bible and change all of the things in it. And this is now the time that Yah is revealing his word and bringing us out of those dark delusions. And he's starting to turn the tables. Rather
you sound just like the ball passer. You're gonna trip when I read it.
Yeah, and he's just starting to turn the tables. And now this is why I say it's important to tell history and not your feelings, and just let it go. We got to just let it go, tell the truth, and these things will set people free. And this is the reason why they hate people who speak on truth. They call you the woke people now, and all that different stuff. But the last thing I wanted to say, I wanted to know, could I share this video whenever I can to the brother that has his own radio station here in Chicago? It's called 1690. Sister Sharon may know it.
All right.
He speaks.
Yeah, I'll have to see it before I share it with everybody.
Okay, all right, because he speaks a little bit. He's always talking about political things, and they're talking about Trump and all these different things, and it'll be good for him to see. But he's very intelligent. And he'll make sense of this. But praise God.
Yeah, I think that we definitely need to be politically aware because that's part of the whole package. We're instructed to, but we don't have to be politicians in the sense of, following these and wanting this president over this president. Like there's some differences, but ultimately the same power persists. They can't do whatever they want to do. There's a guideline, there's a script that they have to follow. So we ought not get head over heels with any of these candidates, but pay more attention to what Yah is saying, because these times are coming no matter who's in office. We got to be prepared as people of Yah. He says in Daniel chapter 2, and in the days of these kings, this is now, man. This is going forward. Elohim of heaven will set up a kingdom which shall never be destroyed, and the kingdom shall not be left to other people. It shall break in pieces and consume all the other nations, and it shall stand forever. Inasmuch as you saw the stone was cut out of the mountain without the hands, and that it broke into pieces the iron, and the bronze, the clay, the silver, and the gold, the great Elohim has made known to the king what will come to pass after this. The dream is certain. Its interpretation is sure. And we know that not just because he says it here, but because we visually see these things happen that we just been talking about. Then King Nebuchadnezzar fell on his face prostrate before Daniel and commanded that they should present an offering and incense to him, right? Overjoyed that he got his dream interpreted, overjoyed that he understands. The king answered Daniel and said, truly, your Elohim is Elohim of gods, the Lord of kings and revealer of secrets, since you could reveal the secret. Now, he's missing the point. This is the only Elohim But he's showing his gratitude towards him. Then the king promoted Daniel and gave him many gifts, and he made him ruler over the whole province of Babylon and chief administrator over all the wise men of Babylon. This is important. The chief administrator over all the wise men of Babylon. As we continue to read the book of Daniel, we're going to see, I believe it's in chapter 8 of Daniel, Daniel speaking with Gabriel. Gabriel announces the birth of Messiah. The Magi from Babylon knew, because of what Daniel spoke when he was in Babylon, given the prophecy, they went to meet Messiah in the Brit Hadashah. The Magi were what Daniel was made chief over. So we see these things happening just the way they're supposed to roll out, right? The Magi, they weren't just some rich dudes coming with, garb. They were from Babylon, right? Preaching the birth of Messiah from Gabriel. And Daniel petitioned the king and set Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego over the affairs of the province of Babylon. But Daniel sat in the gate of the king. That's why I call this the calm before the storm, because it's calm now because things are good. The storm is coming. For us, as we've been reading and talking about these things and watching the video and understanding the prophetical movement of this world, this is the calm before the storm. The storm is coming. We got to be prepared for it. Well, how do we get prepared? Let's see what Paul says, and this correlates exactly with what Brother Charles was talking about. Romans chapter 13, starting in verse 11, it says, and do this, or also this, knowing the time, that now it is high time to awake out of sleep. For now our salvation is nearer than when we first believed. The night is far spent. The darkness of this world is coming to an end. The time of the Gentiles is coming to an end. The darkness will no longer persist. Why? It says, because the day is at hand. The light is coming. Therefore, let us cast off the works of darkness. Let us put on the armor of light. Let us walk properly as in the day. Right? We walk properly as in the day. And I have a full message on this passage in our videos. Maybe June can link it to this video, but you should check that out where I break down this whole passage and what it means, and it directly correlates to what Daniel's prophesying. Not in revelry, in darkness, in drunkenness, not in lewdness and lust, not in strife and envy, but put on the Master Yahushua Messiah and take no provision for the flesh to fulfill its lusts. This is what we have to be prepared for. This is how we have to move now because of what we're reading in the book of Daniel. So I wanted to make sure that we looked at the specific prophecy in the dream, and we started to unravel not just the kingdoms and the empires that came immediately after Daniel, but the fact that the Roman idea, the Babylonian idea, the system persists and exists and still is pushing towards that one world order, which we see Revelation is talking about, where the Antichrist comes up out of and gets people to follow because of the conglomeration of all these things. This is the beginning of labor pains. We got to be aware. Brother Dean.
And just today, I was talking to Zekiah about the journey of Joseph, going being, how can I put it? Going from basically being favored by the king. It's been. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Sorry. Joseph being favored by Pharaoh, and then because of the incident that happened with Pharaoh's wife, Pharaoh's wife trying to seduce him, and then suddenly now you're put into jail. Okay, so he was always an outsider from the beginning, but now he's put into jail. And I was saying to Zekiah that more than likely he would, the prospect would be that he would die in jail. Either he would be killed or he would die in jail. Yep, that was the vision I saw today. But then when the magicians failed, when the magicians failed, suddenly Joseph is called. So I was saying to Zekiah today that take note when the ones who, 1 minute you're the enemy, and the next minute, because you have something, you possess something that is an attribute to them, an asset for them, then now they give you the signet ring, now they clothe you, now they give you a high position, and, going, just when you were speaking about Daniel, it just made me think about how we need to be very careful not to take the fruits, and the gifts and the talents that we've been given. And when we get put into positions where, for whatever reason, they are to be used, be very careful not to take the promotion. Yeah, not to, or if we do, if the promotion must be had because it's the will of the Most High Yah, be very clear that Yah's will is working something out here, and not to get too comfortable, and to be clear that this is not, we wrestle not against flesh, and this is not a flesh situation. So yeah, it just made me think about the Joseph situation and how we can go from being enemies to being exalted and promoted by the enemies, or the spawns of the enemies very quickly, in this life. So yeah, hallelujah.
Absolutely. Very important to know absolutely the difference between Yah's promotion and promotion by the world. Sometimes they correlate, sometimes they don't, and we have to look for those signs. But interesting that you mentioned Joseph's course. The same thing is happening here. They went from about to be getting their heads cut off, to seeking Yah for the dream, giving interpretation, being promoted, and then in the next chapter, they're going to be thrown into the fire again. So, you know what I mean? Their use was no longer necessary. Their worth to the king and his mindset was no longer working. So we got to make sure that we see those things clearly as they unfold in Scripture, because they repeat themselves. They repeat themselves. Everything is repetition in this book. That's why Paul can speak so clearly on it, knowing that it's coming again. Rome is going to be in charge again. That's why there's a mixture of iron with the clay, because there's weaknesses, but there's some strength. But it's not powerful enough to stand for the rock without a hand that's going to crush it. And we know that's going to happen because we know the end of the book, right? But we need to know that we're in the 10-toe time. We're in toe time right now. So be aware. Brother Charles, and then we'll close.
Shalom. Yeah, this is why it's really important to stand 10 toes down on truth. And it's the real. People around you, they may not really see it yet. They may see aspects of it, but they wonder why you do the things the way you do it. And sometimes you may struggle at following Yah at this time, but it's going to be a time that when you submit, you will be able to fully receive what Yah has given to you. It won't be a restriction, and that's a hard thing to do right now, is to fully submit, and that's where I'm at. But I wanted to know, did you speak to the or do you want to speak to the verse 44 today about verse 44, when it says, and in the days of these kings, Elohim of the Shamayim will set up a kingdom which shall never be destroyed, and the kingdom shall not be left to other people. It shall break in pieces and consume all these kingdoms. Did you speak to that, or you have?
Yeah, that was our foundational verse. That's why I went into the times that we're headed for, because this one world order is the presentation of those kings, those same horns we see in Daniel chapter 8, which relates to Revelation, where Messiah comes back and crushes everything. So yeah, that was the purpose of us going into all of those historical facts to show that we're headed in that direction of the prophecy.
Can I give you two verses that correlate with that? And if you already spoke about it before, forgive me. I just got two verses.
Sure, go ahead.
One is in Jeremiah 23:29.
Mm-hmm.
I'll start at 28. Jeremiah 23:28-29 says, "The prophet who has a dream, let him tell a dream. And he who has a word, let him speak my word faithfully. What is the chaff to the wheat, says Yahuwah? Is not my word like a fire, says Yahuwah, and like a hammer that breaks the rock in pieces?" In Jeremiah 51:20 and 23. 21, Jeremiah 51:20 and 20 through 23. It says, "You are my battle axe and weapons of war. For with you I will break the nations in pieces. With you I will destroy kingdoms. With you I will break in pieces the horse and his rider. With you I will break in pieces the chariot and its rider. With you also I will break in pieces man and woman. With you I will break in pieces old and young. With you I will break in pieces the young man and the maiden. With you also I will break in pieces the shepherd and his flock. With you I will break in pieces the farmer and his yoke of oxen. And with you I will break in pieces governors and rulers." And this is what I see correlate, but if it doesn't, well, praise Yahweh.
I think the imagery correlates because it's kind of the same imagery in the crushing, but that particular passage in Daniel was talking about the end of time. The first passage you were talking about, Yah was referring to crushing of the false prophets and empty oracles. The second one is talking about Babylon being used to crush Israel. So same imagery, but different directions in those two. Praise Yah. Brother Mike?
Hey, so yeah, again, let this conversation, this is the kind of stuff that helps. I needed this today because, I've been struggling in my walk since coming here because I'm not that, I don't know how to say it properly. I'm struggling to understand in my walk with understanding. And then I can get discouraged pretty quickly and easily. But when I see what's going on around me in the world and in the lives, and when I think about my grandchildren and the children, all the kids that I've met at the feast we've been to at the assembly, I remember like this is the kind of stuff that helps remind me how important it is in our walk. But as we've been doing this all day, I've been sitting here in the kitchen with my wife and literally watching a storm coming towards us from the looks like the southeast here. And I've been watching this storm blowing and just remembering this story. When I was still in the church, I was taken to a leader in the church wanted me to go to this global leadership summit. I heard a story from this African man, and he said there's an old saying in his village, and it was, "Be the buffalo, not the stupid cow." And the idea is that when a storm comes, the cows will turn around and run away from it, basically adding time in the storm. Right? Because it's going to catch up to them and they're running away from it. And the storm's going to catch up to them from the rear. And then they got to go through the whole thing where the buffalo lowers his head and walks straight through the storm. And we're getting close to that point in this nation. And if anybody doubts it or That's up to you, but we have to be vigilant. We have to be the buffalo, because at the end of the day, if we're not standing on Yah, if we're not willing to lower our heads and walk into this storm with Yah, we're going to be in trouble. And I know I might struggle in my walk day to day, but at the end of the day, I do know that when I'm asked the question, I'm ready to put my head down and walk through the storm with Yah. So praise Yah. Thank you for leading this discussion today. Appreciate it.
Praise God, yeah. And thank you for your transparency, because if everyone's honest, we all struggle, in different parts of our walk. We're in different places. And that's okay because we have the instructions how to get through those struggles. We know where to go to for the remedy, for the medicine, for the antidote. The calm before the storm was purposeful in title today, because we're going to see that sometimes, Yah doesn't save you from the fire. You actually get put in it to get through it, to be strengthened for the other side. So yes, we go towards the storm because it's something prescribed in our walk. It's something prescribed in our path. You can't run from it, because it's gonna catch you anyway. It's gonna get you anyway. So praise Yah for all of you. This was a good study. So next week we'll get into chapter 3 and just see the direction that Daniel and the 3 Hebrew boys go through, so that we clearly see continued history, and the continued revelation of the prophecy of Deuteronomy 28 come to life before us. So praise Yah, and thank you guys for allowing me to go into some of those things, because it's necessary. It's not like we're pulling information that's not in scripture. We're confirming the prophecies in scripture by what we see happening. And that's different. And we have to make sure we do that, because Paul, as we read in Paul, we got to know what time it is. We got to know what time it is. I think the sons of Issachar knew the times and what to do. I believe that's the scripture. But praise Yah, and we won't be back next week. Next week is the Master's Supper. We'll be back the following week. So read ahead, and Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
Toda Robah, praise Abba Yah, from whom all baraka flow. We hope this video encouraged you today. Don't forget to study to show yourself approved and be like the Bereans who tested everything, according to 2 Timothy 3:15 and Acts 17:11. We assemble every Shabbat and during the week with like-minded believers all over the world, virtually, and sometimes we gather in person for feast days. We have something for the whole family, including children. Discover more on our website at assemblyofyahuwah.com, where you can apply to join, give the biblical assembly needs, and find many biblical resources to help you grow in your walk with Yah. To know when we publish new videos, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Jeremiah 33:3 tells us, "Call to Yahuwah, and he will answer you, and tell you great and unsearchable things you do not know." Much shalom.